right. So,
No,
so
thank you.
one of the things I really liked when I looked at Bordentown, where Bordentown was, is how many Evergreen members we have
Oh, wow,
um,
look at that.
that can, most of these people could make it a day trip. And then people that just live a little bit outside that could drive for 5 hours and stay with an Evergreen member and just have a real nice little couple of days and see something new and something very fun and enjoyable. And I'm really uh, one of the things I put in the newsletter this last month that made this trip extra special to me was that I realized it was the first um, non, I mean, it had a specific purpose, but it was someplace I hadn't been before. And it was so good to get out of my habit of staying home, which I not really thought I'd fallen into that, but I had. And so uh, it was really nice to go somewhere. So if you've been stuck at home and aren't and comfortable with it, because we all pretty much love our homes, I recommend plan a trip. It'll be wonderful. So I wanted to show this picture because you can't see this. The little bar is right in the way. There's a train from somewhere. Bordentown has a train station. So if you didn't want to drive, you could take the train. And what on my screen anyway, it says your screen sharing hides this little sign down here. And there's this big, there's a free shuttle. There's free parking if you want to drive. There's limited parking in town. So you could park here and there's a free shuttle to the little downtown area. So I thought the train, though, could make it even more of an adventure, you know? And I'm just going to flip through some of the houses were just so beautiful and beautifully maintained. And some of them are just very different architecturally than what I see in Texas for sure. But this was beautiful. It's got the Widow's Walk up here, so you could see the river. Um, okay. And then I just loved the details on these, the little windows and things. Um, and just the gardens, everything was so lush and grew beautifully. And I'm not sure, this could be like a B&B. It's very close to downtown. And this is what their main street looks like. I mean, just so I was with my cousin and he had been down the day before to check out this restaurant we were going to go to. And, there were cars. And somewhere, I don't know if this was it, but it was like a parking place. So he was by himself. He just, backed in and walked. And the reason that was open is because there was a fire hydrant. And he had a ticket within minutes. So when you park, if you're able to park on this street, get out and look on the other side of the car on the sidewalk to make sure it's not a fire hydrant. And that's why it was available. And just, it was just very fun, very quaint, great little bookstore. This was the restaurant. There's a sign up here, and a bunch of the restaurants on this little town have sort of put up these awnings or little tents, and they have seating under them. And I think they took up some parking places, but it adds to the ambiance. You do want to make a reservation, and you do, if you want to have what I had as the most amazing meal ever, you would want to call and make sure they're going to be serving the special that day or that night. They do have a lunch menu, but I don't think they have that special at lunch. And there's their phone number. So, and they have a great website. So here it is, a white tablecloth kind of place. And this was from their website, but they have this very fun looking bar, and they're known for their dry aged beef. And I don't know if anybody's familiar with that term, but I will tell you what it is. I'm going to read it. I printed out the science behind dry aged beef. The keys to the perfect dry age are airflow, humidity, temperature, and time. In the right environment, these variables are expertly regulated, resulting in the controlled deterioration we know as dry aging. Each stage of the aging process brings about different changes in the scientific makeup of the beef, introducing new flavors and textures. So they do their own dry aging under the bar. Apparently there's a staircase down there, and that's where they age their beef. It was one of those who knew kind of things for me. So I just thought their pictures were better than the picture I took of my dinner. But this is the dry aging process, and I don't really know. I did not research more about what they do, but this is what it looks like when it comes out, and it's pretty spectacular. So here's their menu, and these are the dry. They get them from Allen Brothers. I don't know if it's a Northeast name that you'd recognize, but so when I ordered my dinner, I saw the menu, and I'm like, okay, this is pricey, but just sort of, this was a special dinner, and it's pretty standard actually for this kind of thing, and then it doesn't come with anything. You have to then kind of get if you want mushrooms or asparagus or whatever, that's extra. But let's see. But this bone-in filet mignon was a special. So the waiter tells you what it is. So you don't know how much it is unless you ask. And someone else at the table was going to get it. And so I just thought, wow, it's the only time I'll do this. And I have to say, once I didn't find out till the next day, because somebody else decided they were going to pick up the tab for the table. And so I finally had to ask how much it was. And it was $72 for just the meat, which is not how I normally dine. But this was the most amazing piece of beef I have ever had. And I did call them, and I wanted to make sure they were fine about me mentioning their restaurant on our little travel program, and asked her some of the cooking tips, or, trying to get some more information, because I'd like to actually recreate it if I could. Because, I can't get back to Borden. It's a whole airplane flight to get from Dallas to Bordentown. but so it's dry aged beef, and I think that must have that's a real key factor. But it was prepared with rosemary and thyme, and they actually had full little stems under the meat. So after they had cooked it, they put it on this porcelain plate that was at 500 degrees. And apparently they cooked the meat at 1700 degrees, which I can't even fathom. Um, and it looked like it was in a clarified butter, but those were just the clear juices from the meat. And it had some roasted garlic, like that had been with the juices. I don't know. And then the butter was a root beer bacon bourbon compound butter on top. And I didn't try the butter separately. It just all together, it was really tremendous. Now two people probably could share it because I ended up giving two pieces to two other people, and the waiter came out and he kind of sliced it in fifths or sixths, I think, and each piece was about 1.5 to 2 inches wide. And so I did share. But so this dish was $72, and I'm so glad I didn't know how much it was because I would not have ordered it. But I would make a trip back to Bordentown to have that again. It was that remarkable and that delicious and special. So if anybody lives nearby, you really should indulge in this. And if you're a vegan or vegetarian, I'm sorry, you probably didn't join us tonight. Anyway, on to the rest of the town. There are other restaurants and just the outdoor seating, more buildings. I just this was interesting. I don't know if, they just put odd little decorating things on there. And this was their houses to the right. And this was just really, this may even be their house, the white one. But they just made the yard decorative. This looks like a very old house. And I don't know if everybody knows that often when you see a star like that, there's probably one on the exact opposite side of the house at the same place. And that has been some sort of structural reinforcement that's been necessary. Or it was done at the time of building. But that does look like a very old place. But I just, again, loved the gardens and, I put this in because of the walkway. I mean, that's typical of their sidewalks and things, just easy place to walk. Oh, and this was fascinating. So you see, it looks like water coming out of the can, but they used wires. They took metal wires and stripped them, and they stayed shiny, and they just bent them to look like water. It's like, that's kind of fun. And again, just fun architecture. This was a school started by Clara Barton. And I'm going to read much of this because you just never know when you've done something and it's been successful, and then for some reason you're not the one to go forward with it. So she was best known as the Civil War nurse and founder of the American Red Cross. She was significant in New Jersey history for beginning the first free public school in the state. Barton took a teaching position in Hightstown in 1851, and at the urging of her friend and Hightstown residents, Mary Norton, Mary Norton, while visiting nearby Bordentown, Barton was disturbed by the number of children she found in the streets because their families could not afford private school. Barton met with the local school committee and convinced them to let her try an experiment of educating the children with just 6 male students who were not attending private school in a free school in this charming red brick building. It was so successful that by the end of the year, attendance grew to 600 pupils. The town officials built a new public school, but replaced Barton as principal with a man. Feeling hurt and resentful, Barton left New Jersey for Washington, D.C., where she founded the American Red Cross. So, if she had stayed as principal up in New Jersey, she would never have founded the Red Cross. And that was 30 years later. So I thought that was very cool. Okay, so leaving Bordentown, we went to, and I think it was maybe a 15-minute drive to where the Washington crosses the Delaware. And this is the bridge leaving New Jersey going into Pennsylvania. And again, you know, I just love the kind of grass they grow up there. It's so vibrant green, just beautiful. And this is it's an inn that's very close to this historic little village and where Washington crossed the Delaware. So, so on the map, if anybody is from this area, then you might recognize things. I believe that Bordentown is down here because it is southeast of Trenton. Okay, so this is the park that we went to. This is there's 2 parts, a lower park and an upper park. And I did not go to the upper park. It's about 3.5 miles between. And here, this is the bridge I took the picture from, and this goes through this street right here is right through the middle of the historic buildings, so it's closed. You can't drive down there. But what you'll want to do, I'll show you in a minute. This just gives you an idea because there are a bunch of soccer fields and things over there, but this is really where what you'd be most interested in the lower park. Oh, and this is just information, phone numbers and address. If you want to put it in, just other information, you can make reservations if you want. We did not. And they have wonderful signage. And Jack will be talking about this, but the museum that they have covers quite a bit of it. And before I get to that, let me show, I thought I had a different picture. Oh, it's probably further on. Let me see. Okay, so, you know, as you can, this is in the museum. They just have excellent signage and detailed graphics and stuff. They actually show you how a flintlock works, which, I mean, you just look at that. I mean, it's beautiful, but can you imagine, you know, having to create your own spark? Some of these were implements for healthcare. Let's put it that way. I think this thing right here took out teeth. And I mean, some of these just, this was a portable still, which seemed like it was a natural accompaniment to the tooth extractor. And this was, well, this was an unpleasant thing. My green bar is hiding it, the words, I believe. But anyway, the museum was not too big. They had a wonderful video, little movie you could watch ahead of time, which was helpful and informative. And this is just the way the tents that Washington soldiers were camping in. And you notice there's no floor. I mean, there's no, the wind would blow right under that. And this was in December. So pretty tough times. Here's the map. So when you drive in this way, I wanted to be sure, so you would come up to the River Road, is what it's called. And that inn that I showed you was right up here. And these buildings, I thought I took pictures of them, but I couldn't find them. But they're part of this whole little village. And we'll go through the different buildings. And here's the Delaware right there. This is the museum. And what you want to do when you drive in, here's the parking lot. You don't want to park at the first space you see. You want to see if there's anything down at this end, because this is the only crosswalk. So you can't just cross from here. Just keep that in mind if you don't want, if you're not wanting to add miles onto your little time out there. So this is the crosswalk. This is the entrance into the museum. So this is the Hibbs House. And it's so funny because this brochure, I mean, you figure I just picked it up in June. And this house was like under construction. And this was the prettiest part of the picture. I mean, when you looked at it, it's the same garden. I was taking it from the side because the other stuff, I have some other houses that were under construction. So the little village was Taylorsville, and, built in the 1820s. So this is what the Delaware looks like right at Taylorsville. And what impressed me is that, it doesn't have rapids, but it looked like it was powerful water. And you just, when you think about them crossing the Delaware, there are all kinds of different rivers. And this looked like, depending on the rainfall and snowfall and everything, while it's not very far across, it could be an adventure. So here's another one of the houses, and they were making good progress on them. They were definitely, this could be all done. It would be worth asking before you go if the renovations are finished. But this is the same house. This is the Fry House, and again, it was built by the Taylor family, and it was believed to have been built for, I think, the blacksmith. It might show up on your screen. Again, mine is blocked by the things, so if I'm wrong, sorry about that. And this was the blacksmith shop. So it was, it's a replica of the original. And they do have living demonstrations during special events. It's not every day, but you can walk through it every day. And there is this McConkey's Ferry Inn and Tavern, and it did serve as an armed a guard post, and it's on the map. It was actually, it said additions were made. But it's like, this is where they probably ate dinner prior to crossing the Delaware River. I mean, that's just amazing to me. And I think it says, you all again could read it better than I can, one of the only original structures at the time of the crossing. So some of the others were added later. So the Taylor House is actually across the main street that you drive in on, but it's easy to cross that street and walk over to it. And there is a general store, and this is the Durham Boat Barn. And again, there are replicas. So I took these pictures. Let me show you these boats. You know, they were big compared to a canoe, but when you think about moving an army across a river in winter, they're not big. And they moved horses in them as well, which, let me show you, I think I have a picture. Okay, so I think this is a well-known picture, painting. But you see all the ice in the river, and over here you've got two horses that they're trying to, you know, because your infantry needed, and the generals all needed horses. So anyway, Jack may go into more of that. So you have this depiction of the event, and then, this is current day. There are a lot of other things to see at the in the area. With the tidal water trails, and as you can see, wonderful birds, and flora and fauna are just really, and it's all well marked out. And again, I'm just showing everybody, look how many people there are you could stay with, and just plan a fun little outing right up here. It's all in Trenton, or southeast of Trenton. And here's your state line. So it all happens on either side of that river. And so this was on the brochure of Washington's crossing the Delaware. But I really think it was more like that. But Jack is I'm going to stop screen share, and I guess let me see what the chat question is. And then Jack will take over from there. Let me see. Oh, Jack said, oh, to everybody. Okay. Those stars are connected. The one on the side of that brown building are connected to a central iron rod that runs through the building. They're used in lieu of flying buttresses to hold up the walls. Thank you, Jack. Great. Geneva's, you're in Mechanicsburg. Have you been to Bordentown? Or crossing no? Oh, you should go for sure. Okay, Jack.
Well,
I need to make you share your screen.
Yes, we need to do that. So you need to stop sharing yours, and I will, let's see what I do. I gotta share screen, and I don't have my PowerPoint showing up here.
You know, so, I scroll down, Jack. There were some, like, I had more things open than usual in my toolbar.
Okay, let's try this. I think I do. I'm gonna open up. Hi, everybody. Are we seeing Jack's screen? Thumbs up.
with General Washington?
Yes.
Yes, but I see
Okay.
all of your
Yeah.
computer screen, not just
Got it. Yeah, I'm working on it
okay.
and trying to get to the here we go, slideshow.
You know, while you do that, I should ask if anybody had any questions on Bordentown. Okay. All right.
If not, just a couple of things we can touch on what's wrong with that painting, which I'm pretty sure everyone's well known about. And I did have. There's an interesting set of historical facts for the United States that occurred right around this area, and many of them involved the American Revolution, and this was the United States separating from Great Britain. And the most notable thing about this area is when you look at the timetable about it, that my whole presentation takes place in 10 days of the revolution. But back before that, a year and a half before, George Washington was given command of the Continental Army. And he lost every single significant battle up until this point. So he was not doing well. And in addition to the war not going well for him, his troops were underfed. Their enlistment with the army was due to expire at the end of the month of December. And what was so interesting is, so he'd gone from June 1775 through December 1776, and we're losing the war. And everything about it was going kind of the wrong direction. And Washington's strategy at that point, with only 30 days left, to either win or quit, was, you needed to do something dramatic and important and win something. And so it was kind of this go big or go home strategy. And that's what he did. The painting here did not, the event took place in 1776. The painting wasn't made until 1851. And it was by a German painter named Luzzi, Emanuel Luzzi. But the thing is big. If you've ever, well, it's in the New York Metropolitan Museum of Art, and it's 12 and a half feet tall by 23 and a half feet wide. It's huge and beautiful. Even the painter said, well, yeah, but they crossed the Delaware River at night. I couldn't paint a completely black picture, so he had to paint it kind of in the daytime. The boats that they were crossing the river with were like ore boats. They'd ship iron ore and stuff down the rivers and things in boats. And many of these boats were 30 feet long, but there really wasn't any place to sit down in them. And which is another thing here. They were pretty much a big cargo container. And they did have, the plan on Washington's strategy was he needed to go win something big. And they were on the Pennsylvania side and came across the river and said, when would be time for a good surprise attack? And it was Christmas night. And Washington got his 2,400 troops, 6 cannons, and putting a cannon in a boat, just to put that in perspective, a cannon that fires a 6-pound ball this big, the cannon weighs 1,725 pounds. So the cannon itself is a big deal to get on a boat. And these were guys, bringing cargo across. The picture in the background shows the horses. The horses were not for the generals to ride. They were to pull the cannons. So, that was the main point of these things. And this was, you really did have a lot of people walking on foot, in this type of thing. It was a very interesting winter. The temperature, they say, were about that time when they would have been crossing at night, in the middle of the night, on Christmas night, was 20 degrees. The wind about 30 miles an hour. So not the type of thing where you're going to have a lot of observers out there, but still it would have been completely blacked out. So nobody could see really what they're doing, just getting across. The distance across the river was about 3 football fields. So 300 yards going across and getting 2,400 troops across in the middle of the night. 2 other things were interesting. They crossed not all at one place, because like anything, you didn't want to expose all your troops in case they were spotted. So they broke it up into 3 groups, and they were supposed to have other troops come up from Philadelphia. They never made it. They were supposed to have more reinforcements coming in. One of the things that really made this work was there was a group of Marines from the Philadelphia area that came up to be in charge of the boats getting across, because this was not the sort of thing that most of us could really do. A 30-mile-an-hour wind with ice flows, with current, all this stuff. You needed some pretty capable sailors, and that's what they managed to get together, at this time. The other thing is, once they made it across, they had a 9-mile march in the middle of the night to get to Trenton, and it was snowing, and the roads were slippery, and they're dragging, cannons along and doing all this stuff. And where they were going specifically was the British had hired 30,000 German mercenaries that were from an area that we would refer to as Hesse. And these were Hessian mercenaries. And they were professional soldiers. This is what they did for a living. They go out and fight wars for people. And at this location, there were 1,400 of Hessians at Trenton, securing that. And supposedly they had it pretty secure. And and Washington was going to go and attack that with his troops if he'd get them across. One of the problems that occurred, and you can never tell people enough things not to do in a battle situation. One of his generals, Charles Lee, who was up north of them and was going to come down and help out in this thing, he thought he should have been commander of the Continental Army. And it had kind of his nose out of joint about that. And instead of bringing down his 2,000 troops, he went and visited Widow White's tavern. Well, Widow White had another profession, the oldest profession, going out there. And she had Major General Charles Lee come as a guest. And he's there with the Widow White, and in bus 16 British troops, and they took him prisoner and captured him. And it turns out Widow White was a spy, in addition to being a prostitute, but she was also a spy and worked for the British government. So this was not that uncommon. If you want to read some very interesting thing about all that sort of, behind the scenes stuff that happens in wartime, there's a wonderful book that Brian Kilmeade and Don Yeager put out called The Secret Six. It's Washington's spy ring, where he had his own ring of spies that he used in, you know, to infiltrate the British troops and stuff like that. And there were about half of them were women also. So interesting, you know, that they say that the American Revolution would not have been won by the Americans had it not been for Washington's spy ring. So, little background. But Washington's troop, without the reinforcements from Charles Lee's group, without the reinforcements coming up from the South and Pennsylvania, did attack Trenton and really did a great job. If you were on the side of the Continental Army, it was the first victory that Washington had in 550 days of being commander-in-chief. And they killed or captured 905 Hessian mercenaries and lost only five troops in that. So huge victory. They marched the Hessians back across, took them captive and took them out of the war. Many of those Hessians later stayed and settled in America rather than going back to Germany to be a professional soldier. They said, this is okay place, we're staying here. So very interesting. There's a lot of American artwork that depicts these scenes. So that's what I gathered these pictures from. Not all went well. You had several of Washington's generals killed. Hugh Mercer was killed. Of course, you had the General Cadwalader wasn't able to cross the Delaware and come up, so they didn't get the reinforcements. And then Charles Lee's troops never arrived because he'd been taken captive. They didn't know where he was, but he wasn't around to command them, so they just sat there. So a lot of things, they say no battle plan survives beyond the first contact with the enemy. And that was really the case here for them, even though a big US or a big colonial victory. This was an interesting thing. So after you just won a battle and taken over Trenton, rather than to go back across and do something, conservative, Washington did something out of the ordinary. Coming down from above, from the New York area and the Princeton area, were 8,000 troops commanded by General Cornwallis, who was head of the British Army in this part of the U.S. at that time. And what Washington did, if you can see my screen here, this area over here where Assunpink Creek is, he drew a group over there to attract Cornwallis's attention and his 8,000 troops. And in the meantime, Washington's army went up and attacked Princeton. So kind of a little misdirection there, but went after it. And it was a very tricky thing because at first they had, you had Trenton to defend, and they withstood a counterattack there, but then took their army, Washington's army, and went around and went up to Princeton. This was a tough thing to do. Although it's only 12 miles, when you're pulling cargo and equipment, you're maybe going 1 mile an hour, maybe. And so it took them, pretty much, 12 hours to get up to Princeton. Again, these troops were, had carried what little supplies they had with them and were sort of like, trying to replenish. Many of them had not slept, many of them had not eaten, and quite a few of them started to freeze to death on the way. So you had some people, on the Continental Army side, not able to fight. They were just, doing this. So they did another night march all night and attack Princeton. And in Princeton, this was, if you count Trenton and then that counterattack at Aspenun Creek and then the attack on Princeton, Washington was able to have 3 victories within 10 days. And after going 100 or 550 days with no victories, this was a big deal because what it did is it got the Continental troops to seriously consider re-enlisting and continuing the war. If he had lost any of those battles, that the war would have been over and would have ended. And so this was a major, major accomplishment to do. But you saw, what good leadership and bold action does. And it's so interesting. I got some of these pictures from, there's a wonderful British website that has all about their battles. And of course, they show the British winning every battle, even though like this was a loss at Princeton. They lost and many of the troops were taken captive. But Cornwallis's army, which was defeated at these, did back off, go back to New York, and Washington did not run into Cornwallis again until 1781 at the Battle of Yorktown, which was the final battle of the war, and Washington beat him again. And so interesting history and how these things come around and stuff. It was anytime you get a chance to go and walk some of these battlefields and see these places, it's really inspiring to think about what went on and that, people were doing this without any sort of communication except, word of mouth, and you didn't know what was really happening. But the main point was that the war continued, and the United States was the first government in world history where it was based on a philosophy of twisting things around, where instead of the citizens working for the king or the government worked for the citizens. And it was a major shift in thinking. And that was really what the idea of that is, what inspired the troops to keep going and to try this new idea. So that's the point of that. So Kathleen, I'll turn it back over to you.
Right. Well, thank you, Jack. Does anyone have any questions or comments about any of that? Does anybody live near any of the battlefields? Anybody that's on? Genevieve, you do? You have to unmute yourself. You can hold down your space bar.
Gettysburg.
You live near Gettysburg.
So,
okay.
I live near Gettysburg, and I had been to King of Prussia and to where Washington left or came in contact with Pennsylvania. Yeah, it's a remarkable place.
It's a fascinating thing. The next year later at Valley Forge, where they had all the Continental troops, it was again a survival thing. I mean, I think about when I go tent camping in the winter and say, yeah, it's a little cold here. Well, I live in Texas. Yeah. I mean, it's a whole different matter, up there. So thank you. Sandra had a question.
No, I have more information. This is from my Drive I-95 book. So this is the information that I wrote in the book, which fills in some of the things that already was said. So he wrote, on Christmas night, 1776, Washington had to take a gamble. What was the bleakest time of the war? He wrote in his diary, I think the game is pretty near up. As his troops shivered with hunger and disease, the British and Hessian soldiers were snug in their winter quarters on the New Jersey side of the Delaware River. On this holiday eve, The enemies feasted on goose and tankards of rum, and the sentry guards were less alert since they knew the poor condition of the revolutionary troops, and besides, the river was full of ice. Washington's many shoeless, so imagine you were talking about the cold and the ice and the whatever. They didn't even have shoes, and this is a quote. Some of them have tied old rags around their feet. So the shoeless troops crossed the icy waters in the dead of night in a snowstorm and left bloody footprints in the snow. Even the musket powder became soaked, so they were told to use their bayonets. Around 2,400 men, including two future presidents, James Madison and James Monroe, as well as future Supreme Court Justice John Marshall and famous rivals Aaron Burr and Alexander Hamilton, all made it across. They caught the Brits and Hessians in a drunken slumber. The Hessians, standing guard in the storm, thought the First Continentals were their relief party. The revolutionaries managed to get them to surrender in 40 minutes. No Americans were killed, though a couple of them had frozen to death. They captured over 900 prisoners, 1,000 muskets, and 40 horses. And then, as you said, the incredible victory flashed to all the colonies, changing the minds of many battle-weary soldiers, turning the tide of the war. The army that had been on the brink of falling apart now felt that all was not hopeless and planned for the campaigns ahead.
Thank you, Sandra. You know, one of the things, and all that was dead on. Only thing that I'm getting conflicting historical on is they said the Hessians were not drunk and overfed and sleepy. They said that they were crack troops. There was no evidence that they would have been out of commission in any way. It's just,
it was Christmas.
Right.
Even
though
Party on.
Yeah, you think that, but they said that was highly, highly unlikely for these guys. So I don't know. I mean, there probably reports both ways, but I'm glad you mentioned that about James Madison and James Monroe. You know, these were young guys. Monroe would have been 18 years old. You know,
Hamilton.
Yeah, they were revolutionaries. Now when we think about revolutionaries in other countries, we say it disparagingly, but they were revolutionaries.
Yeah. So all that was pretty, you know, I mean, it is great to see, you know, what the people that were involved in that, and you know, Hamilton, you know,
given up the war, the people in charge would have all been killed, hung for treason.
Yeah.
By the British. I mean,
right.
Yep.
There were consequences. Yeah.
Also, the other thing I never realized until we wrote the book was that this was the first time the British had ever been attacked instead of being the attackers.
I think it's the first time they ever lost.
Anyone dared to attack them, and then they lost. It was unheard of.
Yeah, very, very interesting. But again, you know, if you ever get an opportunity to walk one of these battlefields, and there are many of them, like I lived for several, like during my high school years, I lived near the Yorktown battlefield in Virginia, and we would go run on the battlefield. Just, you would run like cross-country running, and you'd run to places and get a sense of the scale of it and what it must have been like to be running into the cannons, when they're firing at you, and to see what would that have been like. But that's what they did, you know. And so it was very, very. It gave you a good sense of perspective and gave you an appreciation for the bravery and the, you know, what it took to put your life on the line, to, you know, fight for an idea.
Yeah, I just wanted to mention, Gettysburg was mentioned a few minutes ago. We toured the Gettysburg battlefield on Segways. It's so huge. They give you Segways and you just go around and foot, and you know, it's enormous.
Wow.
That was a wonderful experience.
Well, any other questions? Because I think we'll wrap up and then I can stay on for a little bit longer.
I have something important.
We have something about Clara Barton. You know, there's on the Jersey Turnpike, there's a Clara Barton Welcome Center.
Well, maybe it was, because I'm just about to read this online.
I think
we passed it recently and realized that they were changing the name. So we had all
these historical people who were on the Welcome Centers in Jersey. They wiped them.
And now they're going to be named for Judy Bloom, Celia Cruz, Connie Chung, Larry Doby, James Gandolfini, Whitney Houston, John Bon Jovi, Toni Morrison.
What a waste.
And Frank Sinatra. So they're changing all of those names, but I had a story
that celebrities as opposed to people that made life better for everyone.
Right. Anyway, one of the stations all through our writing of the book was the Clara Barton.
Okay, so this is what we had written about her. Clara Barton was born on Christmas Day, 1821, began her work as a teacher in Bordentown, New Jersey. When she was only 11, she nursed her brother David for 2 years when he had been badly injured, and the lessons learned were of much use to her later on. As a teacher, she was so upset by the poor children who could not afford to go to school that she offered to teach for free for 3 months if the town would make the school free for all. The concept, that's when you talked, it was so successful that a larger school had to be built. In 1962, during the Civil War, she got government permission to accompany the sick and wounded as they were being moved. She heard about terrible shortages of field supplies. So she set about supplying their needs, tearing up old sheets for towels and handkerchiefs and cooking for the troops. Then with her charismatic independence, she advertised for provisions in a newspaper. And when the public sent enormous donations, she set up a distributing agency. For 4 years after the war, Clara supervised a federal search for missing soldiers. By 1869, she was traveling in Europe and offered her services to help to tend the civilian victims of the Franco-Prussian War. While in Geneva, she learned about the International Red Cross, and she brought the concept back to America. She took on the formation of this agency practically single-handedly, educating the public through brochures and speeches and paying calls to cabinet heads and congressmen. Her efforts were successful, and it was founded in the US in 1881. She served as its first president and for the next 23 years directed relief activities, retiring at the age of 82 and living to the ripe old age of 91. She certainly lived up to her nickname, the Angel of the Battlefield.
Wonderful.
And she solicited from people of the Gilded Age. Thank God.
Yeah.
They funded her.
Yeah, she was the first GoFundMe, I think.
Yeah.
Well, thank you all for joining today. We really appreciate it.